The Golden State Warriors attempted to trade for LeBron James, and obviously, attempted means nothing came of it. Man, that's a reality I want to live in for a second, so let's indulge me here. Hello everybody, welcome to Os Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Want to say apologies for the lack of videos recently. I had to go back home because my house was selling, had some social occasions in the middle of the week when I normally don't. Just so you know, content is going to be back in full swing, hopefully near daily uploads on this channel for the foreseeable future. In today's video, we're going to be going over the Warriors almost trading for LeBron. We're going to talk about the Cavaliers and how excellent they have been so far in the last 20 or so games. Donovan Mitchell's MVP case because of that performance from the Cavaliers. And then last, we're going to talk about the new look Dallas Mavericks after acquiring PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. So for the Warriors LeBron thing, obviously this didn't really amount to much. The report suggests that the Warriors inquired and the Lakers said they had no interest in trading him, but they were going to run it by LeBron to see if he liked the idea, because the Lakers apparently have this philosophy of letting a star go the moment they're not content. At least that's according to like Jeannie Buss. So with that said, LeBron also didn't really seem all that interested in the trade happening, and I feel like regardless of what clauses he has in his contract, LeBron is only getting traded if LeBron wants to be traded, and he's only being traded to where he wants to be traded. There's not much to this. This wasn't really ever going to transpire, at least not in the current state of this season. I could see a world where LeBron was maybe interested in that idea in the coming off season. Either way, it's a hypothetical world that I'd like to think about for a second, just because this kind of stuff is interesting to me. I would have liked to see this happen just simply because it would give LeBron and Steph both the ability to play far more competitive basketball because they have each other to rely on. It'd be cool just because these guys are as old as they are and still as dominant as they are. It's also LeBron and Steph. Who doesn't love an enemies to lovers arc? This would have been awesome just to see them play together. The few moments we've got to see them play together just in the All-Star game are some of the most memorable moments from those games. The idea of them actually being teammates is quite compelling. Apparently, Draymond Green also made phone calls, I think specifically to LeBron, trying to convince him for this to happen. But he seems, at least for the remainder of this season, to be committed to the Los Angeles Lakers. I do wonder if there is some legacy stuff behind that motivation from LeBron, where like, normally, from a basketball perspective, looking at it, this makes sense and is a good decision for him, but people are going to clown on him for going to join Steph, which I think is silly, and I think regardless from where he is at his career to forward, does not invalidate anything he did before it. There would definitely be a lot of critics of a decision like that. I think a lot of people would ignore the context of the fact that the Warriors have not been good this year, and the Lakers have not been good this year. And LeBron is basically just adding extra shit to his resume. LeBron's not going to retroactively drop spots in the GOAT case, you know what I mean? Like, he's got his spot in that conversation, and nothing he does from here is invalidating the other 21 years of play that he had before this, is what I'm getting at. I'm also interested in what the trade actually would have looked like, what the package would have been. I think it would have started with Klay Thompson's contract. I do think you could potentially make this Chris Paul's contract instead, but I feel like LeBron would really be interested in playing with Chris Paul, even as old as dirt as he may be. It's also really funny just to think about how fucking old this roster would be in general if a trade like that went down. It would be nice just to see these guys being able to play more competitive basketball, whether that is together or separate. I don't like seeing all-time great talent kind of just sit there idly by, not really having a purpose and just being like, yeah, that's a great player, but we're not expecting them to really do anything significant anymore because of the context of the situation they're in. That's kind of rough to me, so that would have been cool. From that front, it's LeBron and Steph again. It just would have been interesting more than anything else. Didn't end up happening, but it really caught my eye as something that would have been interesting. I know, I'm crazy for thinking a LeBron trade would be compelling, but in this case, I think the Warriors thing more than any other hypothetical LeBron trade is really interesting to me. Maybe this pairing could happen at some point, but I'm gonna guess if it wasn't gonna happen this time, it's probably not gonna happen, period. Okay, let's talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, who many of you have been asking me to talk to. I haven't really been able to get to it, especially because I've been out of town the past couple of weeks. The Cavaliers are now the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference. They have a record of 36-17. Ever since Donovan Mitchell returned, they lost their first 2 games to the Bucks and the Raptors, but ever since then, they have only lost 2 games, and they have not done any of those back-to-back, and they've gone on a couple of different 8 to 9 game win streaks in this stretch. Overall, over these 20 games, Donovan Mitchell is averaging 29 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, nearly 2 steals, shooting 49% from the field, 37.5% from 3 on 9.5 attempts, and 83% from the free throw line, only taking 6.5 free throws, which for a 29-point per game season, only 6.5 free throws is pretty freaking low. So the guy is out there getting pure buckets. He's hitting 10 shots a game. The big thing that stands out with Mitchell is the 7 assists, because he's never really been much of a playmaker, and that's really been the biggest criticism you could give him as an offensive player is, I don't love a small guard who can't pass very well, dribbling the ball a ton. My offense is so predicated on a guy who's almost always going to shoot the ball when he has it in his hands. Probably not the best for the distribution of the ball, probably not the best for elevating his offensive game even, because as we know, as I often point out, there is a direct correlation between your playmaking ability and your scoring ability, and being good at one makes being good at the other easier, and vice versa. The fact that he's had more of a playmaking element to his game, I think, has elevated him beyond the status that he had before. Not to mention, he's also been a much better defensive player. The steals this year, I believe, are a career high for him. He's making good decisions. I'm not saying he's out here being an all-defense guy, but he's definitely not anywhere near a defensive liability. I've always thought Donovan Mitchell's defense was a little over-criticized for sure, but this is probably the best defensive season of his career. It's the best passing season of his career. Also, one of the better scoring seasons of his career. And the Cavaliers don't lose. They just don't lose when he's out there playing. I think the guy has a very strong MVP case. And the MVP is kind of wide open right now. There are definitely a handful of names that are more favorited than others. But I think with the race being as open as it is, Donovan Mitchell deserves a place in that conversation. And I don't think he would be my leading pick right now. But if this kind of momentum does carry for Cleveland for the rest of the year, it might have to. Because this win percentage, 18-2 in their last 20, pretty ridiculous, and if they maintain that kind of pace for the rest of the year while Mitchell is putting up these super impressive numbers, then at the very least you have to strongly consider him. Another thing that has been helpful for the Cavaliers this year has been, really in this recent stretch, has been the return of Evan Mobley. They started going on this winning streak without Evan Mobley and Darius Garland, and both of them have returned, each of them to pretty dramatically different results. So on the year before he got hurt and went out, Evan Mobley was averaging 16 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, and a little over 2.5 stocks, right at 2.5 stocks actually. 57% from the field, 20% from 3 on 0.5 attempts, doing this in 33 minutes a game. Since he has returned, in his last 9 games, he is averaging 15 points, 9.5 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and 2 stocks, but he's doing this in, mind you, 26 minutes, so 7 less minutes of action. And he is shooting 57% from 3 on 1.6 attempts, which is not a lot, but he has been shooting them with a ton of confidence. I watched their game versus Washington. He went 2 for 2 from 3, and he was pulling up. He took those shots with pure confidence. Like, he did not hesitate on the perimeter. He had an opportunity, and he immediately took it. And among this stretch of good games, if you actually just take a look at 4-game stretch he had, he averaged 18.8 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 stocks, 67% from the field, and 83% from 3. Looks like the jump shot might actually become a thing. He's obviously not going to shoot 50% from 3 on the entire year. The very high percentage on low volume does, and really the confidence in which he's been shooting it, does give me the faith that he could potentially start bringing those attempts up a little bit and at least get to be a respectable shooter from outside. Now, unfortunately, Darius Garland, since returning from injury, the results have not been as pretty. He is averaging just under 13 points, a little less than 1 steal, 6 assists, 47% from the field, which is not bad for a small guard, but 29% from 3 on just 4.5 attempts per game, getting 27 minutes of action a night. He's still been a positive on the floor. I don't think that there should be too much long-term concern with him. This is a return from a long stretch of time. He wasn't very good to open the year either, so it's not like he's, coming down from some awesome play. But Darius Garland is a good NBA player and was a really good point guard, and I think an all-star, right? Wasn't he an all-star? I don't know. I kind of want to leave this up to Cavs fans for you to tell me. How concerned are you about Darius Garland this year? Obviously, I don't want to harp on the negative stuff too much with how good they have been. That does concern me quite a bit that he has been as bad as he has. Donovan Mitchell has stepped up in the playmaking department, which has made this void feel less significant. He's only averaged 1 less assist since Garland has been back. So I hope this does not spell like potential Garland being gone, that type of situation. Unless, of course, the Cavs want to trade him to the Bulls, in which case I'm all for this breakup happening. The Cavaliers, really good. I don't know if I'm going to quite label them as anything close to a favorite in the East. I would definitely still take the Celtics, and I would probably still take the Bucks. Although they have been real suspects since Doc Rivers, which is, we'll just say, interesting. We'll probably talk about that at another time. Cavaliers are good. That's my point. Donovan Mitchell should be in your MVP bracket to some degree. Last but not least, I want to talk about the Dallas Mavericks, who have gone on a 3-game win streak ever since trading for PJ Tucker and Daniel Gafford. Now, mind you, 2 of those teams were the Wizards and the Spurs, so it's not all that impressive, but they did get a very impressive, dominant win over the OKC Thunder, who are a higher seed than them for sure. Overall, Daniel Gafford, in the 3 games he's played for the Mavericks, has averaged 15 points, 12 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks on 61% shooting. PJ Washington has averaged 8.7 points, 5.3 rebounds, 2 assists, 40% from the field, and 17% from 3. So that's not good. I didn't realize his stats were that bad. His stats were really good in the first game. Went 1 for 6 against San Antonio despite being plus 23. Not going to read into it too much. Daniel Gafford being this good in that stretch does not surprise me because honestly, Daniel Gafford is pretty good at putting up numbers. He's also averaging 4.3 offensive rebounds in that stretch. That's also something very much worth highlighting. But in that game versus OKC, they looked so deep. It feels like the worst player in your rotation who's getting big minutes is Maxi Kleber. And if Maxi Kleber is your worst rotational player, you are doing pretty damn great. Maybe you could argue Jaden Hardy is worse. Definitely a harder player to fit into a playoff scheme, especially because you really don't need all that much guard play with this team when you already have Luka and Kyrie. So maybe he stands out as the real true worst player in the rotation. But either way, I'm looking at 9 players here, and they're obviously without Derek Lively, who are guys that I am all confident can log pretty heavy minutes in a postseason setting. Derek Jones Jr. is someone that I want to highlight because I think he's been awesome for Dallas this year. He is shooting 34% from 3 on the most attempts of his entire career. Also playing the most minutes of his entire career. Real positive defender. Really good transition guy. Luka threw a bunch of crazy lobs in that OKC game. They just got a bunch of big forwards who can play defense like Kleber, Jones, and PJ. You've got Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, who I think that's a really strong center rotation. A little redundant in terms of their skill set. Also, I do want to say in my reacting to the trade deadline video, I did not highlight that the pick that was traded by Dallas wasn't Dallas's own pick. I did know that, but I didn't communicate it properly. I was still saying that I would probably try to get more out of that first than Gafford, but Gafford might end up being this team's saving grace. Maybe I was wrong about that. We'll see. It really depends how much Derek Lively ends up, who's the better player between the 2 of them. I think Daniel Gafford will probably put up bigger numbers, but Derek might be a little bit more consistent of a defender, but who's to say? Really, really good team, and I think these trades are definitely going to make Dallas a significantly scarier team in a postseason setting. Worth mentioning, their bench unit had 4 different players get double-digit points Jaden Hardy with 11, Gafford with 19, PJ with 14, and Tim Hardaway with 10. Really like this stretch for the Mavericks. Really like this deal for the Mavericks. I think they're going to be really fucking good, and I think the Mavericks are probably going to surprise a lot of people in the postseason. But anyways, that is it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.